Hello everyone, and welcome back to Nocturnal Narrative Studio. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know which country you're listening from. So, without further ado, let's begin the story. When I was 22, I couldn't afford the extravagant study abroad programs that all the other anthropology majors went on. Because of this, I spent my first 3 summers digging graves for minimum wage at a rural cemetery called Willowfield Memorial. By the time graduation rolled around, my final opportunity, I realized that it was basically my last chance to get the fieldwork experience I'd been missing out on. Everyone else was heading to grad school, internships, or overseas digs. I had student loans, a car that barely ran, and a dented cooler full of ramen and canned peaches. My options were thin, and I was desperate to pad my resume with something. That's when I found the listing. Short-term groundskeeper needed, remote location, lodging provided, competitive pay. I thought, jackpot. I had cemetery experience I could dig. I didn't care if the place was in the middle of nowhere. In fact, I preferred it. Less noise, less pressure. I sent my info, got a phone call that same evening, and had a start date 2 days later. No interview. No background check. I should have thought that was weird. Looking back though, the fact they never asked a single question about my work history should have been the first red flag. But all I saw were the numbers. I'm a $200 per week. Cash. The guy I spoke to on the phone was polite, older sounding, and only gave me a first name. Rhett. He told me the site was in western Pennsylvania, about 2 hours from the nearest town. Private family land, he said, with historic value. I'd be the only groundskeeper on site, but they had a caretaker who stayed in a cabin nearby. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I packed my bags, filled my tank, and drove through what felt like 100 miles of nothing. Farms, woods, gravel roads, no cell signal. By the time I reached the property, my GPS had long since frozen, and my stomach was tying itself in knots. The entrance was barely marked, a rusted metal gate with no sign, just a tree with a red cloth tied around one of its branches. The D road led uphill through a forest that felt darker than it should have at 2 p.m., and then the trees opened, and I saw the site. Willowfield Estate Cemetery. It was beautiful, honestly. Quiet. Tucked between rolling green hills and thick oak groves. There were maybe 100 headstones, most of them weather-worn and leaning. Some were so old the names had been eaten by time, just lichen-covered slabs of gray stone. The house I'd be staying in was a small cottage off to the side, old but intact. 2 rooms, a kitchen, and a view that overlooked the entire graveyard. There was no one to greet me, just a note taped to the door. Welcome, Matt. Supplies are inside. We'll check in soon. Signed, Rhett. I should have turned around. Instead, I unpacked. The inside of the cottage was clean. Dated, but stocked. Cabinets had canned food, the bed was freshly made, and there was even a pack of brand new work gloves on the nightstand. The whole setup felt too polished, like it had been staged, but I brushed it off. I told myself I'd scored something rare, peace and quiet, good money, and no one breathing down my neck. That night, I walked the grounds to get a feel for the place. Took mental notes. There were maintenance tools in the shed behind the cottage, rakes, a wheelbarrow, shovels, all new, and a notebook labeled Field Record. The record was odd. It didn't list names or burial. Plots, just dates. Scrawled in tight handwriting, April 3rd, activity detected. Avoid northwest plot. May 15th, no humming tonight. Wind steady. June 2nd. Left offering, wasn't taken. Marked it. No explanations, no context. I thought maybe it was the caretaker's notes. Weird personal journal entries. I closed the book and decided I wouldn't let it get to me. That night, I slept hard. No dreams. Just quiet. For a while I thought I'd found peace. But the next morning I woke up to a sound. A slow dragging noise just outside the window. When I pulled back the curtain, there were marks in the soil. Like something had been pulled or had crawled. I told myself the dragging sound was nothing. A raccoon, maybe, or the wind pulling at the grass. Even though the soil looked freshly disturbed and led in a long trail from the tree line to the back of the cottage, I convinced myself not to care. Not yet. That morning, I walked the perimeter again with a notepad in hand and a red pen. I took this job seriously. It wasn't just a paycheck. I'd been told I'd be logging changes in the terrain, cleaning headstones, checking for structural shifts in older plots. Stuff I knew how to do. I counted 94 headstones. Some were nothing more than cracked marble chunks, others tall obelisks still standing strong. Most were from the 1800s. I only found one newer stone, dated 1992. It was small and sunken into the earth like it was being pulled downward. That one made me uncomfortable. Its name was gone, just a smooth surface with scratch marks. The date, though, was untouched, almost carved deeper than the others. I flagged it in my notes and moved on. There was no cell signal anywhere on the property. No Wi-Fi. I checked the corners of the house for hidden routers or repeaters. Nothing. The only landline I could find was in the cottage kitchen. It didn't work. The silence should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It felt like the silence had weight, like it filled up the space where birdsong or bugs should be. I went back to the shed to check the tools. There were 3 brand new shovels, each with red tape on the handle. They were identical, except one had initials carved into the shaft, RW. I flipped through the field record again. Same initials showed up on some pages. RW marked the southern line. RW saw shadow between rows 4 and 5. RW heard it speak. The last one stopped me cold. RW heard it speak. I kept flipping, faster now. The most recent entry was dated just 2 weeks ago. New groundskeeper arriving. Site has been quiet. We'll see. It wasn't signed. I spent the afternoon marking out the property boundaries with orange tape and flags like I was supposed to. The weird part was, someone had already done it. Faded blue flags sat right where I placed mine. Same exact spots. I hadn't been told about a previous keeper. I emailed Rhett from the dusty laptop they left me in the corner of the cottage. It had no programs other than Notepad, a calculator, and a stripped-down GPS app that didn't open. I typed, "Was there a worker here before me? Field record seems incomplete." I hit send. The bar said, "Queued." No response. That night I stood on the cottage steps and watched the cemetery. It was beautiful under the moonlight, a little mist rising between the stones. No movement, nothing strange. I almost convinced myself the morning was just my nerves playing tricks, until I checked the back of the house again. The dragging marks were gone. Not faded, gone. The grass upright. Soil packed, like nothing had ever touched it. But now there was a footprint, just one, bare, small, pressed deep into the dirt beside the back door. I locked the cottage and shoved the dresser in front of the door. I didn't sleep much. I told myself the next day would be normal, and for the first few hours it was, until I got to the far northeast corner of the cemetery, the last row, where I found a headstone that wasn't listed in the records. It was short, plain. Just a name, Matthew Wren, that's my name, and the date carved beneath it was next week. I stood over the headstone with my name on it for a long time. At first I just stared, waiting for it to make sense. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was someone else with the same name. Matthew Wren isn't exactly rare, but the date, next week, that wasn't random. And the stone looked new, not just recently engraved, recently placed. The dirt around it hadn't settled. No grass, no weathering. Like someone had planted it the day before I arrived. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked. fast. By the time I reached the cottage, my palms were sweating through the gloves. I sat on the porch steps, trying to breathe, trying to think of any rational explanation. But every time I thought I had one, I remembered the footprint behind the house, the dragging mark, the old entries in the field notebook. I emailed Rhett again. Subject, urgent. There's a grave with my name on it. Please explain immediately. The message queued, never sent. I waited the rest of the day for a call, or an email, or someone, anyone, to show up. No. One came, but that night, something changed. Around 2:14 a.m., I woke up to the sound of digging. Not just a scrape or shift in the dirt. This was rhythmic, measured, a shovel in soil. Scrape, lift, pause, repeat. I froze in bed, held my breath. It was coming from just outside the window. The same window near the northeast corner. The grave with my name. I got up slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. I tiptoed across the room and peeked through the edge of the curtain. No one there. But the sound didn't stop. It kept going, same pattern, same pace. And then it stopped. Not faded, not slowed. Just gone, like it had never been. There. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps against the glass. I didn't check. I backed away, locked the bathroom door, and slept in the tub with the lights on. By morning, it was like nothing had happened. No footprints, no soil, no marks. But when I checked the northeast corner again, the ground around my headstone had changed. It had been dug up. A fresh pile of dirt sat to the left, like someone had started the process but hadn't finished. And resting at the center of the grave, a shovel, same red tape, same initials as before. RW, that name showed up again in the field notebook later that afternoon. A new line had been added. Grave prepared. He's seen it now. We begin. No date, no signature. I flipped back through earlier pages. RW had been logging entries for months. I found one that chilled me to the bone. He thought this was a job. That's the trick. I tore the page out and crumpled it. I considered packing up and leaving, but when I tried to start the truck, nothing. Dead. Not the battery, not the starter. The entire electrical system was fried. I popped the hood and saw every wire had been cut. Clean, no fraying, no chew marks, like someone had deliberately disabled it. I was stuck. I spent the rest of the day inside the cottage, staring at the windows, listening for that sound. That night, it came again. Only this time, it wasn't just one shovel. It was 3. 3 distinct rhythms. Scrape, lift, pause, repeat, all in unison, coming from 3 separate corners of the graveyard. I didn't look. I just sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in my hand, waiting. And somewhere around 4 a.m., the digging stopped, and the bell rang. Soft, close, like someone had placed it on the porch railing. I didn't check until daylight, and when I did, there was no bell, just a silver coin, cold to the touch, resting on the edge of the porch, right next to a note written in what looked like my handwriting. You said yes, keep digging. I didn't leave the house for 2 full days after I found the silver coin on the porch. I kept the curtains drawn, unplugged the old laptop, and pushed the dresser in front of the door again. I didn't trust the windows. I didn't trust the landline. I didn't even trust my own memory anymore. I kept asking myself if I'd written that note, the one that said, "You said yes, keep digging." I didn't remember it, but the handwriting was dead on. The curve of the M, the hard hook on the H. It was mine. The coin stayed on the counter. I didn't touch it after the first time, but every time I turned my back, it moved, slightly, first an inch to the left, then back, then upside down. I tested it, placed it under a cup, and marked the edge with a Sharpie. By the time I came out of the bathroom, the cup was on the floor, and the coin was sitting on top of the notebook again. It wasn't just the coin. The shovel was back too. After the digging sounds that night, I went to the northeast corner again. The pile of dirt had been smoothed over, like someone had completed the grave. But there was no coffin, no disturbance. And the shovel, the same one marked RW, was leaning against my cottage wall. Clean, polished, like it had never been used. I checked the field record again. The entries had changed. Some were missing entirely. Others had new lines added, ones that seemed to refer to me. He's starting to feel it. The house is shifting. The floorboards know. He dreams of the hole now. I hadn't written them. At least I didn't think I had. That's when I realized something truly messed up. The house was settling in the wrong direction. The floorboards tilted subtly toward the back door. I'd noticed my chair sliding a little each day, but chalked it up to bad construction. Now I could see the pull. Everything in the house, from the coffee pot to the bed frame, was slowly shifting toward the back, toward the cemetery. It wasn't gravity. It was invitation. That night, I caved and tried to call out. I drove. The truck down the path with nothing but neutral and brakes made it halfway to the main road before the wheels locked up. Every dashboard light came on at once, even though the engine was off. When I stepped out to look, the back tires were sunk 4 inches into the soil, and under the truck bed, a hole. A perfectly round hole, no wider than a man's shoulders. I didn't sleep at all that night, but just before sunrise, I started hearing things. Voices, not from outside, from the field record notebook. It was closed, sitting on the table. But I swear on everything. I heard a whisper from inside it, like a voice pressed between the pages, waiting. I opened it. There was a new entry. He knows now. Let him see what we kept buried. Below that, a name was scratched in, not typed, not printed, etched with something sharp. Rhett Wren, my grandfather's name. I never met him. All I'd ever been told was that he'd disappeared in the 70s, left a note, vanished into the woods. No one ever found a body, but my hands were shaking now. Because the initials, RW, on the shovel, on the pages, on the field record, they weren't just some stranger. They were him. He'd worked here. He never left. And now I knew why I had been hired. I wasn't just a worker. I was the next one in line. The night after I found my grandfather's name in the field record, I didn't try to sleep. I kept all the lights on, stacked furniture against the doors, and set my phone up to record video with the flashlight on. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. If I heard digging, I'd catch it. If something moved inside the house, I'd have proof. I sat in the kitchen with a hammer in my hand and the notebook open in front of me. I kept flipping to that last entry. Let him see what we kept buried. Those words had burrowed under my skin. They felt less like a sentence and more like a command. Around 1:46 a.m., it began. Not digging, rattling, a low vibration coming from the walls. I put my hand against the paneling and felt it tremble, like there was something inside the wall, between the beams. It shifted once, then twice, then scratched, not like nails on drywall. It was slower, methodical. Scrape, pause, scrape. I backed out of the kitchen, hammer raised, and made it to the hallway. That's when the lights died. All at once, no flicker, no hum, just black. The only light left was the harsh white beam from my phone, still recording and facing the window. And that's when I saw it. In the recording, not in real time. I looked down at the phone screen, and there was a figure in the window. Not tall, not short, no face. Just a silhouette with a wide-brimmed hat and long arms hanging at its sides. It didn't move, but the curtain behind it did. That's when it hit me. It wasn't outside the house. It was inside. I dropped the phone, grabbed the hammer with both hands. Spun around. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound, but the window curtain was still swaying. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall until the sun came up. When I picked up the phone again, the recording was gone. No video, just a corrupted file titled Wren. That morning I walked the graveyard. I had to know if the northeast corner had changed. The ground was exactly the same as before, smoothed over, packed down, but now the headstone with my name was gone. In its place was a small hole, just wide enough for a person's arm, and inside, resting at the bottom, was a bell, brass, tarnished, tied with red thread. I didn't touch it. That afternoon, I found something worse. Behind the shed, under a loose board, I found a set of photographs. All of them were Polaroids, all of them taken at night. They showed the cottage, the porch, the graveyard, my truck, and in each one there was a figure in the background, same shape, same hat, never in the same place twice. In the final photo, the figure stood in the cottage doorway, and the timestamp printed at the bottom, tomorrow's date. The next morning, I found the cottage door wide open. I know I'd locked it. I'd stacked a chair under the knob and even wedged a broom under the handle. Old tricks I'd learned from a friend who grew up in rough neighborhoods. But all of it was gone. The chair was tipped over in the corner. The broom was snapped in half and tossed on the porch like a toy. Nothing inside was taken, nothing broken, except for one thing. The mirror in the bathroom. It had been shattered from the inside, cracks spiderwebbed outward from the center, but the glass hadn't fallen out. It was still clinging to the frame like it had been punched by something that wanted to look out, not in. On the mirror, written in black marker, were 3 words: "Stop filling holes." I hadn't filled a single grave. Not one. But I remembered what Rhett had said on the phone before I arrived, that it was a maintenance job. Patch sinkholes, fill soft ground, keep the plots neat. At the time I hadn't thought much of it, but now it hit me. I was supposed to cover something, not bury. Burying hides, filling seals. Looking back though, the holes I'd seen, the one under my truck, the one with the bell, they weren't dug by hand. The ground had opened itself. That evening, I tried to leave on foot. Packed a backpack with canned food, 2 water bottles, a flare gun from the shed, and one of the shovels, the only weapon I had. I made it maybe 2 miles down the dirt path before I started hearing the bells. Not one, dozens. They came from every direction, from the trees, from the earth, some high. Some buried so deep the sound came up through the soles of my feet. I ran. I don't know how long. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. When I stopped, out of breath and half sick from running blind, I looked around. I was back at the cottage. The front door was open again. The lights inside were on, and waiting on the porch was a photo of me running, taken just moments earlier. I don't remember taking it. I never heard a shutter. But there I was, mid-stride, mouth open, eyes wide. Behind me in the picture, just barely visible in the trees, was the figure with the wide-brimmed hat. Closer now. That night, I locked every window, nailed the shutters shut, slept on the kitchen floor with the field notebook clutched to my chest. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the floor shook. A deep knock, not on the door, but under the floorboards, 3 times, then silence. When I worked up the nerve to lift one of the boards, I found something wedged beneath, a slip of old brown paper. Brittle, water-stained, scrawled across it in the same handwriting from the mirror. 1 more week, that's all the land needs. There was no signature, but underneath that, someone had written in red ink, "Dig your way out," or "Stay down here with me." I didn't sleep after I found that note under the floorboards. I couldn't. Every sound in the cottage felt louder. The hum of the fridge, the groan of the beams, the wind pressing against the walls like breath. I was running out of time. 1 more week, the note had said. I didn't know what that meant, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. The next morning, I emptied the gas from the lawn tools into a cooler and doused the truck's battery. It didn't help. Whatever fried it wasn't mechanical. It was something else, something underneath, so I walked. I didn't pack anything this time. No food, no map. Just the notebook and the red-handled shovel. I followed the fence line, staying out of the woods. I marked trees with chalk as I went. Every 5th step, I scratched a line in the dirt, just in case the land tried to twist itself again. It worked, and for a while. I made it to the edge of the woods. I could see the road in the distance, actual pavement, a sign, a chance. That's when the bells started. Louder this time, violent, clanging like metal teeth in the wind. The earth trembled, the trees leaned in, and right in front of me, about 20 feet from the road, the ground opened up. A sinkhole, wide and sudden, swallowed the path. No sound, just a silent pull. I ran off the side, leapt into the ditch, and crawled the rest of the way to the road like a soldier under fire. When I made it to the blacktop, the bells stopped. The woods fell quiet, too quiet. A ranger picked me up 3 hours later, mumbling about trespassing charges. I didn't care. I begged him to take me to the nearest police station. At the station, I gave them the address of the property, Rhett's name, the field notebook. I expected confusion, maybe a lecture. What I got was worse. The officer said, "Willowfield, that land's been closed off for decades. Fire took the whole ridge back in '89. Nothing left but a scar." I told him I'd been living there for a week, that the house was standing, the shed, the graveyard, everything. He stared at me, then left the room. When he came back, he had a folder, yellowed, dusty. Inside were photographs, black and white, of the same cottage, burned to the ground. The shed collapsed. The graveyard, nothing but black soil and charred headstones. No trees, no grass, just ash. The officer slid a final photo across the table. It was of a headstone. The engraving read, "Rhett Wren, 1932, 1978, I." Pointed at the date. But he hired me. I spoke to him. I have the notebook. The officer didn't blink. Rhett Wren was declared missing. No body ever recovered, but we found this. He reached into a sealed evidence bag and pulled out a coin. Silver. Same as the one I'd found on the porch. I left the state that night. I don't know how long I drove. I ended up 3 towns over, sleeping in my car outside a diner. I got a job cleaning tables. Told people I was passing through, but I still have the field record. It won't burn. I've tried. 3 nights ago, I woke up to find it open on the motel nightstand. A new entry had been added. The land never lets go. It waits. And beneath that, next bell, October 12th. 3:03 a.m. That's tomorrow. And I just heard a knock on the door. 3 soft taps, followed by a whisper through the keyhole. "You forgot to fill the hole." This story is fresh in my mind since it literally happened just a few months ago. My family is odd. I won't get into everything, but basically, everyone in my bloodline works with the dead in some way. Funeral directors, embalmers, obituary writers, even one cousin who runs a website that sells pre-made tombstone inscriptions. I know how that sounds. Weird, morbid, creepy. I get that a lot. But when you grow up around it, death stops feeling like a big, scary thing and just becomes part of the background. A job, a duty, something to do with your hands. That's why when I tell people I became a gravedigger, they assume it was a last resort, like I ran out of better options. But the truth is, it was always kind of expected. In our family, manual work with the dead was seen as honest, maybe even sacred. We don't talk about death in a flowery way. No passed on or went to a better place. You die, you get buried, the earth takes you. Simple. Most people dig graves with a backhoe or tractor. Mine tends to do it the old way. We don't use machines, though. That's where people start raising eyebrows. And that's fine. They can think we're freaks. But we've got rules. Old ones. They've been passed down for as long as I can remember. My grandpa had them written in a notebook with a hand-stitched black leather cover. He called it the workbook. Every grave dug by hand. No holes opened after dark. Only family allowed to work the soil. And never, ever dig in the northeast corner of the land, where the old fence line has collapsed and the trees grow too close. I didn't question it growing up. Honestly, I still don't fully understand it. I was just taught that section was tired ground, like the soil had already done its part and shouldn't be disturbed again. You leave tired ground alone. We bury our dead on family land. Been doing it since the 1800s. The graveyard's not big, maybe 2 acres surrounded by oaks and pine. The oldest stones lean like teeth, and the newer ones are etched with weird symbols that don't match any church I've seen. When someone dies, we hold the wake at home. Then we dig the grave ourselves. Not just one person either. It has to be done as a group. Minimum 3. Never less. Never alone. I've heard that's because of weight distribution or old folklore. But some of my uncles say it's to make sure she doesn't speak, whatever that means. Looking back, though, the oddness was always there. You just don't notice how strange something is when it's all you've ever known. When I was little, I used to play near the old stones. My grandma would yell at me for stepping too close to the northeast corner. "You're not listening," she'd say, pulling me away, eyes hard like I'd just run toward traffic. I thought it was just old people superstition. I didn't understand that they were afraid of their own land. My cousin Eli and I were the youngest in the family crew. We were in charge of cleaning up trash, sweeping the paths, and sometimes handing tools off during digs. It felt normal. We didn't talk about it at school because we knew how it sounded. But between ourselves, we joked about it like it was a club. We even had names for some of the graves. The corner cradle, a small unmarked stone that always had acorns stacked on top, even when no trees were above it. The mirror slab, a black marble stone that stayed warm in winter and cold in summer. The listener, a flat grave near the center with cracks that sounded like whispers when the wind blew just right. I know how ridiculous this sounds, but it's what we grew up with. I didn't start feeling like something was wrong until this past spring. It started with Eli. He stopped showing up for maintenance days, wouldn't answer calls. When I finally cornered him at the hardware store, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Said he was done, wouldn't step foot on the property again. Said he heard the earth say his name. I laughed at first, thought he was screwing with me. But then he said something that stuck with me. She knows who does the digging. She remembers us. He wouldn't explain who she was. I haven't seen Eli since. My uncles won't talk about him. They just say he moved on. But I still see his boots by the back shed, still covered in soil. In my family, we don't just bury our dead, we do it right. That's what they always said. My grandfather was the enforcer of the rules, and when he died, my uncles took over like it was a sacred job. There were steps for everything, precise ones. Not following them wasn't just sloppy, it was dangerous. I know how that sounds, but I mean that in the literal sense. When someone passes, we don't call a funeral home. We dress the body ourselves, say our own words. We carry them to the plot, and we dig it by hand. Always 3 of us, never less. If only 2 are available, you wait. Doesn't matter how long. The process starts at dawn. The first rule, mark the perimeter with salt. One of us walks the outline of the new grave with a mason jar filled with coarse salt, making sure none spills inward. If a single grain falls into the soil, we have to choose a new spot. Next comes the soil blessing. We mix a small jar of spring water with ash from the old stove out back. The same stove my great-grandfather used to cremate stillborn calves back in the 1930s. You stir that mix with a rusted iron nail and pour it into the center of the soon-to-be grave. Then you dig. No machines. No shortcuts. 3 shovels. 1 direction. Clockwise. You're not allowed to switch to counterclockwise, even if someone's arms are burning or a rock's in the way. My Uncle Ross once dug through the base of a rotted tree trunk with a broken spade before he'd break that rule. And the most important part? You don't speak while digging. No jokes, no small talk, no cursing, not a single word. You can breathe, grunt, wipe your brow, but the moment you say something out loud while working the soil, the whole thing has to stop. The first time I helped dig, I was 13. My grandma had passed quietly in her sleep, and the family gathered early that morning. The air smelled like rain even though it hadn't stormed in days. The 3 chosen that day were Uncle Ross, my cousin Eli, and me. I remember how heavy the dirt felt, how it clung to the shovel like it didn't want to be moved. Eli's hands were already blistered by the time we hit 3 feet. Ross was sweating through his flannel, and the whole time, silent. Not one of us said a thing. I almost broke once, almost asked for water, but something in Eli's eyes stopped me, like he was trying to say, don't. Looking back, though, I remember feeling watched, not by family, not even by animals. It felt like the earth itself was listening. After we finished, we lined the bottom with pine boughs, placed the casket in by rope, and covered her slowly. Every 5th shovel of dirt was supposed to be dropped in from shoulder height, to let the air back in, my grandfather used to say. I never understood what that meant. That day, nothing strange happened. No signs, no voices. But every burial after that, things got harder. The ground resisted more. Shovels broke. People twisted ankles. Once, my Uncle Mark's nose bled for an hour straight after tossing in the last pile of dirt. No one said anything about it. Just stuffed his nose with gauze and handed him a beer. The rules never changed. Even when the family started shrinking, fewer of us were left to do the work, but they still refused to dig with outsiders. No hired help, no neighbors, no machines, only blood. It started getting worse after Eli quit. We had a burial last spring. My cousin Haley's husband, Frank. Car wreck, closed casket. We gathered at dawn like always, but Eli didn't show. My uncle tried to get a neighbor to stand in, but the second he stepped over the salt perimeter, every crow in the trees screamed at once. I mean it. A wall of noise, dozens of them, all at the same time. The neighbor backed out without saying a word. We waited another hour and then started with just 2 diggers, Uncle Ross and me. That's when we broke the rule. The silence. Ross slipped and fell into the half-dug grave and shouted, "God damn it!" without thinking. The air shifted, like something sucked all the heat out at once. My nose started bleeding. Ross threw down his shovel and told me to wait. Went back to the shed for something. I think a bottle of that saltwater mix. He never came back. I found him 20 minutes later, standing just outside the northeast fence, staring into the trees, eyes wide, mouth full of dirt, literally stuffed like he'd tried to eat his way into the ground. He never spoke again. He's alive, he eats, he blinks, but he doesn't talk. Just hums the same 4-note tune over and over, no matter what time of day. We still haven't finished Frank's grave. My family just told people we cremated him, but the casket's still in the shed, and the shovel Ross used is stuck in the soil halfway in. Every time I try to pull it out, it won't move. And sometimes, when I stand near it long enough, I can hear someone breathing under the ground. The next time I was called in for a burial, it was for Aunt Sissy. She wasn't really my aunt, more like my grandfather's second cousin, but we all called her that. She'd lived alone in a crumbling farmhouse on the south side of the property, the one where the windows were always covered with quilts, even in the summer. She used to bake corn muffins with chunks of onion in them and leave plates of them by the graveyard gate. said it was polite, said it kept things from following her inside. She died in her sleep. Peacefully, from what I was told. No trauma. No mess. Her obituary was short. Just her name, dates, and the line. She returned to the land with grace. My Uncle Jeb said it like a compliment. Like that meant she'd done things right. The burial was scheduled for the following Thursday at sunrise, per usual. My cousin Heather and I were picked to assist Jeb. It was her first time on a dig team. I hadn't worked one since Ross went silent, but no one acknowledged that. Just handed us shovels like nothing had changed. I showed up early, before the light even touched the trees. The ground was still wet with dew. There were 3 jars of salt laid out on the stone wall, each labeled with a name. Mine, Heather's, Jeb's. Aunt Sissy's casket was resting under the tarp beside the shed. Small, simple. Pale wood with no handles. My family never believed in fancy boxes. We didn't speak, not even a greeting. Jeb started pouring the salt perimeter. His hands shook a little. That's the first time I realized how old he'd gotten. He was always the solid one, but now he moved like his bones were filled with sand. Heather walked the boundary behind him with a small broom, sweeping pine needles off the salt line. I knelt beside the plot and poured the ash water into the center, the iron nail clicking softly in the glass. Then we dug. The soil felt different that morning, looser, wetter, like it had already been disturbed. We were in a safe section of the land, midwestern corner where my mom and my Uncle Todd were buried. But every time my shovel hit, I felt resistance, like there was something just under the top layer. Not rock, not roots, just pressure. Heather's. Spade struck something hard about 2 feet down. She paused, glanced at Jeb, and he gave a small shake of his head. We kept digging. At one point, I lost count of how many feet we were in. The hole felt deeper than it should have been. We didn't use measuring sticks. We'd always gone by the elbow rule, meaning the grave should reach your elbow when you stand in it with arms down. But this one just kept going. I looked up and realized the sun had barely moved. We'd been digging for nearly 3 hours, but the light hadn't changed. That's when I started sweating. Not from the work, but from something else. A cold bead of sweat ran down my back like I'd just stepped into a freezer. Jeb spoke. One word, stop. That was enough. We dropped our tools. He didn't explain, just motioned us to climb out of the grave. Then he stepped back and looked at the earth, hands on his hips. I could see it then, the outline. The soil we'd been digging in wasn't natural. It had already been opened once before. There was a faint rectangular discoloration around the base. Someone, long ago, had buried something here. And now we were digging right through. Jeb walked to the shed, came back with a bundle wrapped in gray cloth. I'd never seen it before. He unwrapped it like it was glass. Inside was a set of old silver coins, a small bell, and a dried flower I didn't recognize. Heather watched with wide eyes. I could feel her trembling next to me. He dropped the items into the hole, one by one. Then he said, very softly, "She's not here for Sissy." That's when it hit me. We hadn't chosen the plot. The land had. We filled the grave back in without placing the casket, left it half dug, then started fresh about 50 feet west. No one said why. No one asked. We just moved like we were being watched, like we didn't want to draw attention to the mistake. After the second grave was done, we placed Aunt Sissy in without a word. Not a ceremony, not even a prayer. Just hands on rope, descent, and cover. The sun finally rose fully after the last shovelful. That night I couldn't sleep. I dreamed I was back in the original hole, except it wasn't a grave anymore. It was a mouth, and the roots were teeth. And something deep below was whispering my name. The next morning, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. That Wouldn't be weird if I'd gone back out to the graveyard or helped clean up. But I hadn't. After Aunt Sissy's burial, I went home, locked my doors, and stayed inside. I even kept the porch light on all night, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. And yet, when I woke up, my sheets were clean, my clothes untouched, but my fingernails were packed with dark, damp soil. At first I thought maybe I'd scratched at my boots in my sleep. But that kind of dirt? That wasn't from the yard. It was cemetery soil, black and gritty, full of tiny root, hairs and ash specks. Anyone from my family could tell the difference. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just clipped my nails short and tried to forget it, but it kept happening. 3 nights in a row, I woke up with dirt under my nails. Then the 4th morning, there was something else. A bruise on my shoulder, circular, dark purple, like something had grabbed me hard. Only I live alone. No one has keys to my place. And there was a smell in the room, faint but real, like dried flowers and old coins. The same scent Jeb's strange cloth bundle gave off when he opened it. That's when I started to wonder if Aunt Sissy's burial hadn't ended the way we thought it had. I went back to the family land that afternoon, told myself I was just going to look around, make sure no animals had dug anything up, maybe clear branches. But deep down, I was checking something else. The second grave, the one we'd actually used, looked untouched. The first one, though, the one we'd abandoned, it had changed. The ground had sunken, just slightly, maybe an inch or two. But enough for someone like me, someone who's been around graves their whole life, to see it wasn't right. And in the center of that slight dip was a fresh crack in the earth, thin, straight, as if something below had pressed upward. Just a little. I left without going near it. That night I dreamed again. Same grave, same roots, same whisper. But this time, there was a face, half buried, eyes open, not blinking. And it was wearing my necklace, the one I'd lost when I was 13 digging my first grave. I woke up gasping, sweating through the mattress. When I sat up, I nearly screamed. There was mud on the floor, not much. Just a few wet footprints, barefoot, small, leading from the bed to the front door, and the lock on the door was undone. I started sleeping with a baseball bat again. Kept salt in a ring around my bed. I even tried to call Jeb, but the number rang dead. I drove out to his trailer the next morning and found the place empty. Door wide open, coffee still hot. No sign of him anywhere. His truck was there. His coat, his phone, just gone. I didn't call the cops. What would I tell them? He disappeared? Into what? The ground? But in my gut, I knew. The land had taken him. And it wasn't done. The next day, I got a letter. No return address, just my name scrawled on the envelope. Inside was a single slip of paper. You spoke while digging. I froze. I hadn't. Had I? I kept going over it in my head. That last burial, that weird pressure. Jeb's sudden command, my dry mouth, my silence. But then I remembered when the shovel slipped, when the soil collapsed inward for a second, I had gasped. Just a word. Wait. That was it. One word. And I'd broken the rule. Now I don't sleep more than 2 hours at a time. I keep waking up to that smell, that sound, something tapping on the window. A low humming that matches the same 4 notes Uncle Ross repeats to this day. And I swear the dirt beneath my home is starting to change. Soft spots, like someone's been digging. I went back to the family land alone. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even bring a flashlight, just waited until dusk and parked at the edge of the tree line like I used to when I was a teenager sneaking beers with Eli. I sat there for a while, engine off, windows cracked, listening. It was quiet, no bugs. No wind, just the hush that wraps itself around this land like a wet blanket. It's not real silence. It's a waiting kind of silence. The kind that leans in when you're about to say the wrong thing. I finally stepped out of the truck and walked toward the old shed. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Maybe something of Jeb's. Maybe a sign that this was all in my head. What I found instead was the workbook. Grandpa's old stitched notebook. The one that held the burial rules, the family diagrams. The diagrams no one was supposed to touch unless you were next in line. It was sitting on the table inside the shed, open to a page I'd never seen before. The paper looked older than the others. Not yellowed, gray, like it had been buried. The ink was faded but still readable. At the top of the page, in careful handwriting, were 5 words: blood given, memory planted, returned. And below that was a map, not of the cemetery, of the roots. Dozens of lines spiderwebbing beneath the surface of the land. Names written along them: Ross, Eli, Sissy, Jeb, all branching off from one central spot, the northeast corner, the tired ground. There was one more name written there, mine. No date, no line connecting to it. Just the name, drawn in darker ink than the rest. As I stood there staring at it, I heard something behind the shed. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, not dragging, deliberate. I backed away from the table and crept to the window. It was too dark to see much, but I caught a shape moving just beyond the reach of moonlight. A figure, not tall, not fast, just standing, still, watching the shed. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just waited. Then the voice came. Low, female. Familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. You came back too late. I blinked and she was gone. No sound, no rustle, just empty woods. I ran. I didn't even lock the shed behind me. I jumped in my truck and didn't look back until I got home. When I flipped on the kitchen light, there was something on my counter. A single flower. The same kind from Jeb's cloth bundle. Black petals. No stem. Wet with dew. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was about superstition. This wasn't just an old family tradition passed down for pride. This was ritual, and the land wasn't passive. It was feeding. We weren't just caretakers. We weren't just gravediggers. We were the offering. And now I think it's my turn. I haven't slept in 2 nights. The humming hasn't stopped. It comes from underneath now, under the house, under my bed, beneath the floorboards. Sometimes, I swear I can feel the boards rise a little, like something's pushing against them. Last night, I found soil in my shoes. I hadn't worn them all day. And this morning, I woke up with the workbook on my chest, open to a page with one sentence written in fresh black ink: "You're next to dig." I didn't plan it. I just grabbed a bag, my truck keys, and left. No calls, no notes. I drove west without a destination, hands shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel with both fists. Every mile between me and the family land felt like a breath I hadn't taken in years. I thought I was free by the time I hit the state line. Looking back, though, I should have known better. I booked a cheap motel in a nowhere town and tried to sleep. I left the TV on low and kept a light on in the bathroom, like that would make a difference. The hum was gone. The smell, too. No footprints, no dreams. But when I opened my bag the next morning, it was there. A piece of burlap, wrapped around a silver coin. The same kind Jeb had dropped into the first grave. My phone was dead, even though I'd fully charged it the night before. No signal, no service, no data. I opened the motel window for fresh air and taped to the outside of the screen. From the outside was a strip of yellowed notebook paper. In my grandfather's handwriting, "You know where you belong." That was the first time I cried. Not just panic, I mean grief. Like I'd already lost. I drove to a library, 3 towns over, and used a public computer to try and find someone, anyone, from my mom's side who'd gotten out. There weren't many. One cousin in Tennessee, last seen in 2009. Another who'd moved to Oregon, then vanished. All records stopped, like they'd never existed. And the thing that scared me most? None of them had headstones. Not in our land, not in any land, just gone. I spent the next 2 days bouncing between motels, trying to stay ahead of, I don't know, the land, my blood, something older than both. It didn't work. The third night, I stopped in a diner off Route 12. The waitress looked tired but kind. I hadn't eaten in almost a day. I ordered eggs and toast and coffee. She came back with my plate and said, without looking at me, "You got dirt on your tongue." I blinked. "What?" She didn't answer. When I looked at my reflection in the napkin dispenser, I saw it. Soil. Dark, packed earth on the tip of my tongue, like I'd been chewing it. I ran. Didn't pay, didn't look back. Just drove until the tank was empty. When I stopped, I was back in my own town. That's how I knew it had me. I don't remember turning around. Don't remember choosing the road. But my body had brought me back. Back to the land. Back to the roots. My truck died just outside. The gate. The northeast corner looked darker than it ever had, like the trees themselves were leaning in. I walked, barefoot. No idea where my shoes had gone. The shovel was already there, stuck in the soil, just like Ross's had been. The moment I wrapped my hand around the handle, I heard them, all of them. Voices from beneath the earth. Eli, Jeb, Aunt Sissy, even Grandpa. They weren't angry. They were hungry. My hands moved without me telling them to. I dug, and with every shovel of dirt, something came closer. I could feel it. It wasn't about tradition. It wasn't even about family. It was about feeding the land, about giving it one more so it would let the rest sleep. But this time, I wasn't going to finish the hole, because this time I was digging up. I don't know how long I lasted. I don't know if I passed out or was pulled away. But when I came to, it was morning. The grave was open, but it was empty. No body, just a small piece of paper at the bottom of the hole. You can run again, for now. I don't remember driving away. I know I left on foot. Remember my soles bleeding from the gravel. I remember collapsing in a ditch off the highway and sleeping there, covered in dew and fog, until a farmer woke me up the next morning asking if I was hurt. I told him I'd been hiking and got lost. He didn't believe me, but he didn't ask questions either. Just gave me a bottle of water and pointed me toward town. I haven't gone back to the family land since. Not physically. But in dreams, I'm still there. Every night, I'm walking the path behind the shed. Every night, I see that shovel sticking out of the earth. Every night, I know if I dig again, it'll be me that stays down there this time. I moved states again. Changed my name on the lease. No family forwarding. Address. I live in a studio apartment above a pawn shop now. The ceilings leak when it rains and the heater kicks like a mule. But it's mine. It's quiet. It doesn't hum. I took a job at a car wash. No cemeteries, no soil, no funerals. But the ground still knows. 2 weeks ago, a customer came, in with dirt on his tires. I was scrubbing it off when I smelled it. That same mix of old flowers, wet iron, and ash. I nearly dropped the hose. I turned to check the cab, just an old man behind the wheel. Thin, with pale eyes and a familiar scar under his left cheek, same as Uncle Jeb, but it couldn't have been. Jeb is gone, right? The man never looked at me, just drove off once the wash was done. Later that night, I found a silver coin under my bed. Same one as before. Last night, the humming started again. It came from under the floorboards. And this morning, I found my shoes filled with dirt. I haven't told anyone this. Not because I'm scared they won't believe me, but because I'm scared they will. Because if someone says, "Yeah, me too," then I'll know I was never supposed to leave. I called the local sheriff's office back home last week. Just asked if anyone had reported the cemetery, the family land, for anything strange. He paused, then said, "That land's not on any county plot." I said, "That can't be right. It's been in my family for generations." He said, "Sir, I've lived here 42 years. There's nothing but forest on that ridge." I hung up. I Googled satellite images that night. Zoomed in on where the land should be. Nothing. No shed. No stones. No roads. Just a stretch of dead trees and overgrown grass. And right in the center, a large black circle. Like a burn mark. No caption. No labels. Just empty. Sometimes I wonder if I died there. If everything now is just a shadow of what's left. But then I feel it, under my feet, the floor rising ever so slightly, like breath, like roots, like something underneath me is still reaching up. And last night I woke to a sound, 3 knocks, coming from under my mattress, and a whisper. There's still one left to dig. I never thought I'd end up working at a cemetery. It wasn't something I dreamed about as a kid or anything like that. I kind of just landed there. Bills were piling up, and the job market in my town was a joke. So when the local cemetery needed a night gravedigger, I took it. No questions asked. A paycheck's a paycheck, right? The place is called Everpine Hill. It's old, like mid-1800s old. The gates are rusted iron, the trees lean like they're whispering secrets, and there's moss on just about everything that doesn't move. It's quiet though, peaceful. I actually started liking the stillness. No co-workers, no rush, no one asking dumb questions. Just me, a shovel, and the sound of wind through dead leaves. On my second week, I noticed something odd in the northwest corner, the old section. Most of the graves there are barely legible now, stones worn smooth by time and rain. One of them had a tiny metal bell tied to a string, which trailed down, into the ground. At first, I figured it was one of those old Victorian death customs. In case someone got buried alive. People used to be real scared of that. I didn't touch it, just looked, shrugged, and kept going. I had work to do. But that night, while I was finishing up near the new plots, I thought I heard something faint. A soft tingling, not constant, just one ring, then silence. You ever hear a sound that doesn't match its surroundings? That doesn't belong? That's what it felt like. It wasn't wind chimes or a bird call. It was a bell, clear, crisp, like someone gently pulled the string from beneath. I stood still for a second, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. I even laughed. It off. Figured maybe a squirrel bumped into it or something. Next night, same thing. Same spot, same ring. But this time, louder. Still just one. I finally walked over to it, flashlight in hand. The bell wasn't moving. String still taut, tied tight to the iron loop. I gave it a little nudge with my boot. No sound. So what the hell had I heard? I started sleeping worse. Not because I was scared. At least, not yet. It was more like a weird itch in the back of my brain that wouldn't go away. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that soft ring. I told myself it was stress. Long hours, cold nights, too much coffee, that sort of thing. But on Thursday it rang twice. Not loud, not fast, just 2 slow little notes. Ding, ding. It sounded almost polite, like it was asking. I don't know why, but I muttered, "You good down there?" Immediately felt like an idiot, like I was trying to joke my way out of being creeped out. No response, of course, just silence and the low groan of wind pushing through the trees. But when I turned to walk away, I swear I heard the faintest tug, like someone lightly tested the string. Not enough to ring the bell. Just enough. That was the first night I had the dream. I was standing in that old section again, except the graves weren't broken or crumbling. They were fresh. The grass looked new, too. Too green. And someone was standing near the Bell grave, not moving, just watching me. Their face was covered in dirt. Waking up after that dream was like coming up for air. I shot up, heart pounding, even though I couldn't remember most of it. Just flashes, the face caked in dirt, the sound of that bell, and a voice I couldn't place whispering something I couldn't quite hear. I told myself it was just a dream. A weird one, sure, but I'd been hanging around old graves and creepy trees all week. It was bound to mess with my head a little. Still, I didn't sleep much that day. Just laid there, scrolling through my phone, trying not to picture the dirt-covered face. Back at work that night, I avoided the northwest corner. Didn't even look in that direction. I stayed closer to the newer plots, trimmed back some overgrowth, raked up leaves. But around midnight, the fog rolled in. Heavy and low, the way it does in horror movies. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, even with the flashlight. That's when the bell rang again, 3 times. Ding, ding, ding. I didn't move for a long minute, just stood there, breathing through my nose, trying to convince myself not to run like a cartoon character. Eventually, I turned toward the sound. The fog made it hard to tell, but I could feel where it had come from. That same grave, that same damn bell. I walked slow. Every step crunched wet leaves and made my nerves jump. When I got there, the bell was still. Still tied. Still old. Still harmless looking. But now, the string looked newer. That didn't make sense. It had been a frayed old twine the first time I saw it. Now it looked like clean white cotton string. Neatly looped. Not worn at all. I crouched down and ran my fingers along it, dry, tight, not something that had been buried underground for over a century. So, someone changed it? Why? Who was touching this grave? Back at the small tool shed, I checked the maintenance log. Only 2 of us had access. Me and Fred. Fred was 68, retired twice, and barely moved faster than a sloth. No way he was crawling around at night swapping strings on ghost bells. I decided I'd ask him anyway, just to be sure. Before heading home at sunrise, I passed the bell one more time, just to see. And that's when I noticed the dirt around the grave looked disturbed. Not a lot. Just a little shifted, like something underneath had settled, or moved. I went home, didn't sleep. Around 10 a.m., I called Fred. "Hey, you touch anything out near the old section? One of those Victorian safety bells?" He chuckled. "Son, I haven't been out there since they moved the statue in '03. Too many trip hazards." "Why?" "No reason," I said. "Just looked newer than I remembered." He paused. "You mean the Barker grave?" I didn't know the name. "I guess. Why?" Fred sounded thoughtful. "They buried Ezekiel Barker there in 1872. Had one of them bells. His wife made the caretaker promise to put it on his casket. He was a sleepwalker, afraid he'd end up buried alive." He gave a dry laugh. "Never heard of it ringing, though." I didn't say anything for a moment, then asked, "What happens if it does?" Fred chuckled again, but this time it didn't sound like a real laugh. "Well, I guess somebody ought to check if he's still down there." I didn't laugh, and when I hung up, I realized something else. I'd never actually checked the headstone name. The next night I got there early, before sunset. Brought coffee, gloves, and a small crowbar from my garage. Not that I planned on using it, but something about that disturbed dirt stuck with me all day. I figured if I saw anything really weird, I'd just report it and be done with it. I went straight to the old section this time. No point putting it off. The fog hadn't rolled in yet, so I could see the grave clearly. Same spot, same bell, still tied with that crisp white string. This time I bent down to read the headstone. Sure enough. Ezekiel Barker, 1826, 1872. There was an inscription underneath. He wandered far in life. May he rest in stillness. It made me pause. That didn't sound like a comforting phrase, more like a warning. I brushed the dirt gently near the base of the stone. Just loose topsoil, no footprints, no shovel marks. But again, it looked unsettled. I didn't dig. I'm not crazy, but I did do something I probably shouldn't have. I sat down across from it and waited. I don't even know what I was expecting. The bell to ring in front of me, a hand to shoot up from the ground like a movie. Of course, nothing happened. The sun dropped below the hill and shadows bled across the grass. Everything turned cold real fast, and I could feel the air change. You ever feel a kind of stillness that pushes at your ears, like the world's holding its breath? That's what it felt like. Then, ding, just one soft chime. I didn't move. I just stared at the bell, and this time, I saw it move. Not a lot. Just a slight sway, like a breeze passed through. But the trees weren't moving. The air was dead still. And the string, it tightened for a split second, like someone gave it a gentle pull from underneath. I whispered, "Who's down there?" I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Curiosity. Maybe I just needed to say something to break the tension. But then, I heard the dirt shift. I froze. It wasn't dramatic. No bursting coffin or anything. Just a faint crunch, like dry earth cracking under pressure. Like something below was adjusting, settling, or rising. I stood up fast and backed away, heart racing. My flashlight flickered, classic, and in the dark, every tree started to look like a figure. I decided I'd had enough weird for one night. But just as I turned to leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A second bell. 2 rows down, different grave, smaller headstone. Same setup, bell on a string. And the string, it was swaying. Not from wind, from tugging. I walked over slowly, shining the light on the grave. This one read, Catherine Barker, 1830, 1872, beloved wife. So they were buried near each other. Married. That made sense. What didn't make sense was why both bells were ringing now. I backed up, checked around me. No pranksters, no animals, just me. And as I turned my headlamp back to Ezekiel's grave, his bell rang again. Once, then hers. Once, back and forth, like a conversation. I didn't wait around to hear the rest. I grabbed my thermos, flashlight, and walked quickly, not running because I wasn't ready to admit how scared I actually was, back to the maintenance shed, locked the door behind me, sat down, didn't speak, didn't drink, just sat. And somewhere out there in the middle of Everpine Hill, those bells kept talking. I stayed in the shed for the rest of my shift, didn't go back out, didn't even peek through the window. I kept the lights off and listened. The bells weren't loud, they never were. But once the wind died down, I could still hear them. A soft metallic back and forth. Ding, then another. Like a slow, steady code I didn't understand. I kept telling myself it had to be something natural. Maybe old underground pipes shifting. Maybe vibrations from the road miles off. But I knew better. I'd seen the string pull tight. I'd seen the second bell. When sunrise finally came, I packed up and left without checking the graves again. I told myself I was just being cautious, but truthfully, I was rattled. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying the way the bells seemed to respond to each other, like they weren't random, like they were talking. I tried to be logical about it, thought maybe someone else was messing with me, someone who knew the old cemetery lore. That would be easier to accept than the idea of 2 graves communicating. I didn't sleep much that day either. Every time I shut my eyes, I'd hear that soft metallic chime echo in my head. I ended up researching Ezekiel and Catherine Barker, but there wasn't much. Just a marriage record, some census listings, and a passing mention in an old article about the town's founding families. No scandal, no tragedy, just normal folks. That somehow made it worse. There was no ghost story behind them, no violent deaths or mysterious disappearances. Just a couple buried side by side, with strings tied to bells and something still reaching through the dirt. Back at work that night, I thought about asking Fred to join me, just for a second set of eyes. But I knew how that would go. He'd laugh, maybe tell me to lay off the late-night caffeine. So I went alone again. I didn't go near the Barker graves right away. I made myself walk the rest of the property first. Cleaned the path by the new mausoleum, checked the perimeter fence, tried to act like everything was normal. It was a weak routine, but I needed something to hold on to. Eventually, I circled back to the old section. The fog was thicker than usual, clinging to the trees like spider webs. The headstones barely showed through, just silhouettes in the gray. I held my flashlight tight and stepped carefully, listening. At first, nothing. Just the usual night sounds. Wind, leaves, a distant owl. But then I heard it again. Ding. Then another. Not loud, not fast, but definitely there. When I reached Ezekiel's grave, something was different. The bell was gone. The string was still tied to the loop at the base of the headstone, but the bell itself had been snapped off. I looked around, checked the ground. Nothing. No metal, no signs of where it might have fallen. Just the string, dangling uselessly. I moved to Catherine's grave. Her bell was still there, swaying slightly, as if someone had just let go. I stood between them, unsure what to do. I didn't want to touch anything. I barely wanted to look at them. But before I could even decide whether to leave or stay, I heard a third sound, a different bell, from deeper in the woods behind the cemetery. I froze. There weren't supposed to be any graves back there. That part was nothing but old trees and overgrown brush. The sound came again, lighter this time, a higher pitch. It was faint, but it wasn't my imagination. And worse, it felt closer. I stepped back instinctively, but I didn't run. Not yet. I just scanned the tree line, trying to see what could possibly be back there. That's when I noticed something, barely visible in the fog. Another headstone, half buried, no path leading to it, no bell on top. But right beside it, tied low to a crooked iron rod, was a string. It was pulled tight. I shouldn't have gone into the woods. That's the part that still gets to me. I had every reason to turn around, to go back to the shed and wait out the shift, but I didn't. Something about that third bell pulled me in. It was curiosity, sure, but not the regular kind. This felt heavier, like I wasn't the one choosing to walk toward it, like the pull was already happening and I was just trying to keep up. The trees back there aren't like the ones near the road. These are older, taller, the kind that grow too close together, with thick, gnarled roots above ground, almost like they're trying to trip you on purpose. I had to push through thorny brush just to get a clear look at the headstone. It was small, sunken, cracked down the center. No name on it, just a faint carving that looked like the letter J, or maybe L. Could have been anything. Beside it was the iron rod I'd seen from the clearing. Not a full bell like the others. This one was a shard, broken off at the top, rusted so badly it looked like it would fall apart if I touched it. And yet, the string attached to it was brand new. Bright white, clean. It was stretched tight into the ground at an angle, like someone had recently pulled it from underneath. I stood there for a minute, listening. Everything felt too quiet. No wind, no night animals, not even bugs. Just stillness and that soft, waiting pressure in the air again. I backed up slowly, then turned around. I didn't hear the bell that time, but I felt it. That pressure in my chest again, like I was being watched. Back at the shed, I locked the door like always and sat down at the workbench. I should have written it all off as a prank or some leftover maintenance quirk. But the problem was, I knew where all the strings were now. First Ezekiel, then Catherine, and now this third one in the woods. They were tied the same way, same knots, same clean white cord. None of it matched the age of the graves. I pulled out the cemetery map from the drawer, the official plot layout. As expected, the woods weren't marked. That third grave didn't exist on paper. No record, no number, no name. Just empty space. And yet it was there, sitting in the fog, ringing. The next day I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to the town archives. Told the clerk I was researching local burial customs. She was helpful enough, pointed me toward a few dusty file boxes and faded blueprints. Most of it was boring. Building permits, plot transfers, family histories. But one thing stood out. A list of restricted burials from the late 1800s. Mostly smallpox victims, unmarked graves, and one name blacked out completely. Only the date remained, October 1872. The same month Ezekiel and Catherine Barker were buried. That night, I didn't go near the graves, not any of them. I stayed by the shed, flashlight off, ears open. But the bells didn't ring, not once. The cemetery was silent all night, and somehow, that was worse, because silence meant waiting. And I had the sinking feeling whatever was beneath those graves, whoever had pulled that third string, was waiting for me. The next night started normal, if you can still call anything normal after that. I got there just before dusk and lingered in the truck longer than usual. Coffee went cold in the cup holder while I stared out the windshield at the rusted cemetery gates. They didn't look any different than they had the week before, but something about them felt heavier, like they were warning me not to come in. When I finally got out, I didn't go straight for the graves. I took the long way around, walking the gravel path, pretending I had actual work to do, but I couldn't stop checking over my shoulder. Every corner of the place felt like it was watching me. Even the newer headstones seemed too still. Eventually, I found myself in front of Ezekiel's grave again. The bell was still gone, but the string had been retied to something else, an old iron hook someone had stuck into the ground. That hadn't been there before. It was bent, rusted, and stabbed into the dirt like a stake. The string was looped around it neatly, purposefully. I didn't touch it. I turned to Catherine's grave. Her bell was still there, but the string now had something small tied to it. At first I thought it was a piece of cloth, but when I knelt down and looked closer, it was hair. A single braid. Gray, brittle, tied with a faded ribbon. My chest tightened. Someone had left it there, or pulled it up. Either way, it hadn't been there 2 nights ago. I stood up fast, heart thudding, and nearly dropped my flashlight when I heard something. Just a shuffle. Quick, light, like a footstep behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the fog curling along the grass and the rows of graves standing quiet. I told myself to leave, to walk away and call it a night. But then I remembered the third grave, the one in the woods. I hadn't gone back since finding it, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the date, about the missing name in the archives, and about how the cemetery map didn't show it, so I went back. The trees were even darker than I remembered, the canopy above thick enough to block the moonlight. My flashlight caught pieces of the path, roots, fallen leaves, some broken, stones I hadn't seen before, like there used to be more graves out there, and they'd been swallowed by the woods. I reached the third grave and stopped. The string was gone. So was the iron rod. In its place was a freshly dug patch of earth. Small, not deep, like someone had scraped at the surface and covered it back up without care. There were marks in the dirt, dragging marks. That's when I noticed something just beyond the grave, half buried in the underbrush. a wooden box. I didn't want to go closer, but I did. I stepped carefully, flashlight shaking a little as I crouched in front of it. It wasn't a coffin, not full-sized. It was more like a keepsake box, worn, covered in moss, with initials carved into the lid. EB. I opened it. Inside was a bell, not rusted, not broken, a clean brass bell, still shiny despite the damp. Beneath it was a folded note, yellowed and brittle. I picked it up, hands shaking, and carefully unfolded. It. There were only 4 words written in old ink. Don't let them talk. My flashlight flickered again, just once. But when the beam steadied, I wasn't alone. Standing behind the 3rd grave, just beyond the tree line, was a figure, pale, still, watching. I dropped the box. I didn't run right away. I couldn't. My legs just wouldn't listen. I stood there, frozen, with the flashlight pointed somewhere useless, off to the side, lighting up nothing but tree bark. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, partly hidden behind one of the thicker trees, watching. No sound, no breathing. Just the heavy stillness that had been haunting this place all week. Eventually, my body caught up to my fear, and I backed away. Slow at first, then faster. I didn't look down at the box again. Didn't take the bell. Just left everything there and made my way back through the trees, heart hammering, not bothering to hide the crunch of dead leaves underfoot. By the time I reached the main cemetery path, I felt sick. Not just shaken, physically sick, like something was pushing down on my chest and stomach at the same time. I bent over and tried to catch my breath, but the air felt wrong. It had that charged feeling again, like the sky before a thunderstorm, but thicker, heavier. I started walking toward the shed without really thinking about it. It was the only place that felt like mine in that whole stretch of haunted ground. But just as I reached for the door, I heard something from the center of the graveyard. A bell, not 1, 2. They rang out in sequence, clear, deliberate. Ezekiel, Catherine, back and forth, ding, 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 ding. The rhythm was too perfect to be chance. It felt like a signal, or a warning. I stood there, hand still on the doorknob, trying to decide whether to stay or go back and look. I shouldn't have gone back. I know that now. But part of me thought, if I don't see it with my own eyes, it'll just keep growing in my head. So I turned, walked back into the dark, toward the source of the ringing. As I got closer, I noticed something different. The string on Ezekiel's grave was moving again, but this time it wasn't just swaying. It was pulling, like it was being tugged. From underground, slow and steady. I crouched down to look closer, and that's when the bell came loose. It didn't ring. It just dropped, like whatever had been pulling let go. Then Catherine's bell did the same, fell right off the hook, and hit the dirt with a soft thud. Both bells, side by side now, still, silent. I picked one up, Ezekiel's. It was cold. Not regular metal cold. Freezing, like it had just come out of ice. I dropped it again without thinking and stepped back. The fog had thickened again, but this time it was creeping low to the ground, curling around the graves like it knew where to go. That's when I heard whispering, faint, not English, not a language I knew, but voices, definitely voices, rising just above the wind. It was coming from everywhere, from the trees, from the ground, from under the stones. I turned, in a circle trying to figure out where to focus, but it didn't matter. It was all around me now. And then, in the direction of the woods, I saw something moving. Not the figure from before. This was lower to the ground, crawling, slowly, deliberate, like someone dragging themselves with broken limbs. I didn't wait this time. I ran. Back to the shed, locked the door, turned off the light, sat in the dark and tried not to breathe too loud. The whispering faded after a while. Or maybe I stopped hearing it. But I sat there until dawn, gripping the workbench like it was going to float away. When the sun came up, I stepped outside and saw it immediately. In front of the shed door, 3 small piles of dirt, neatly shaped, like someone had scooped handfuls from a grave and placed them there overnight, and sticking out of the middle pile was the bell from the woods, the one that wasn't supposed to exist. I didn't touch the bell, just stared at it, sitting there in that little mound of dirt like it had planted itself overnight. It wasn't buried, it was placed, deliberately. That was the part that really got to me. Someone, or something, wanted me to see it. And not just see it, but know it was meant for me. I backed into the shed, locked the door again, and just sat. I didn't have a plan. What do you even do in a situation like that? Call the cops and say the dead are leaving you bells like house cats dropping gifts? There's no script for this stuff, no training, just instincts. And mine were telling me I was already in too deep. By the time Fred showed up to cover the morning shift, I'd already made up my mind. I needed to step away, at least for a few days. Get some sleep, eat something that didn't come out of a vending machine, and figure out whether I was losing my grip or if this was really happening. I didn't say much to Fred, just told him I wasn't feeling great, which wasn't a lie. He grunted and nodded, like he'd seen plenty of guys hit their wall out here. Maybe he thought it was the isolation. Maybe he'd had his own nights of weird noises and shadows in the fog and just decided not to dig too deep. But as I got in my truck and turned the ignition, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. In the back corner of the cemetery, near the edge of the tree line, someone was standing, watching. I turned to look. Nothing there, just swaying branches and gravestones leaning into the morning light. I drove home with the windows down, trying to shake off the heavy air that seemed to cling to me, like cemetery fog that hadn't finished its business yet. But even hours later, lying in bed with the blinds shut and the door locked, I couldn't relax. I kept thinking about that note. Don't let them talk. What did that even mean? Who were they? Ezekiel and Catherine? Or the thing in the woods? And if someone wrote that, when? Why leave it buried next to a bell and a blank grave? Unless the bells were meant to be silenced. Later that night, just as I was starting to doze off, my phone buzzed. A text, no name, just a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "They're listening now." I sat straight up. I didn't know whether to block the number or throw the phone out the window. I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. A few minutes later, I got another message. Just one word. Barker. That was enough. I got dressed, grabbed a flashlight, and drove back to Everpine. I wasn't thinking straight. All I knew was I needed to see the graves again, see something again. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining any of this. But when I got there, everything looked clean. No disturbed soil, no bells, no piles of dirt outside the shed. The iron rod near the third grave was gone. Even the little braid of hair from Catherine's grave had disappeared. It was like someone had gone through and tidied up all the strange things before I arrived. I walked the grounds for nearly an hour before I noticed it, etched into the back of Ezekiel Barker's headstone. Faint, shallow, like someone had scratched it there recently. 3 words. You rang back. I didn't put them there, but something clearly thought I had answered. I didn't stay long after I saw those words. You rang back. There was something final about it. Like the message wasn't just acknowledging me, it was accepting me. Like I'd been invited to something I hadn't meant to RSVP to. I left without checking the other graves, without looking into the woods, without even locking the shed. I just got in my truck and drove until I saw other cars and streetlights and places where things made sense. I called out of work the next day, said I needed a break. Fred didn't ask questions. I guess people burning out in graveyard jobs isn't unusual. I spent most of that day in silence. No TV, no music, just pacing around the apartment like a caged animal. I kept thinking about the bells, how they started out as an old superstition, a way to protect the living from a mistake. But now it felt flipped, like the bells weren't there to save people from being buried alive. They were there to warn the living not to answer. That night, I stayed up late. I tried to write down everything just to make sense of it. The ringing, the third grave, the note, the text messages. But every time I tried to put it in order, it slipped away. Like trying to remember a dream after you've already gotten out of bed. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise outside my window. Not unusual, I live near a road. But this wasn't traffic. It was soft, delicate. A sound I'd gotten very used to. Ding. One ring. I stayed frozen in place. Didn't go to the window. Didn't turn on the light. Just sat in the dark, breathing quietly, telling myself I imagined it. But then it came again. Ding. Closer this time. I don't know what kind of person walks toward a sound like that, but I did. Slowly, like my body was on some kind of invisible track. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. Nothing. Just the street lamp and a line of parked cars. But the sound came again, this time from inside the apartment. I spun around, flashlight in hand, heart already pounding. The living room was empty. The kitchen too. But when I stepped into the hallway, I saw it, sitting on the floor just outside my bedroom door. The bell, the same bell from the woods. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. I just stared at it, shining the light to see if it had a string, a note, something. But there was nothing. Just the bell, cold and quiet now. Then my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I didn't even want to look at it, but I did. The message said, "You brought it with you." I tried to think back. I hadn't taken the bell. I left it in the woods. I was sure of it. But maybe I brushed against it. Maybe it clung to my coat. Maybe something else had followed me, something that wanted me to hear it. I sat on the floor for a long time, just staring. I thought about calling someone, anyone. But what would I say? That I brought home a ghost bell? That I think dead people are trying to call me from under the dirt? It sounded ridiculous even in my head. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I picked up the bell, carried it to the back of the apartment complex, and dropped it in the dumpster, slammed the lid shut, stood there breathing hard in the cold, waiting to feel better. But I didn't, because even as I stood there, I heard it again, ding, right behind me.